Isn't it insane? Ghana and Nigeria, two neighbors, can't trade without converting to US dollars. A Kenyan coffee exporter must route his payment through a New York bank just to get money to Egypt. Even when Africa trades with itself, the West still gets paid first. It's not a glitch in the system. It is the system. A system designed to keep Africa dependent, controlled, divided. For decades, it worked. 54 African countries rich in gold, oil, and human brilliance remained poor in one thing: power. Because they didn't control their money. They didn't even use their own money to trade with each other. They used the dollar, or the euro, or the CFA franc, a colonial relic that still forces African nations to store their reserves in Paris. But while the West was busy watching Russia, China, and the Middle East, Africa moved in silence. No media headlines, no IMF approval, no dramatic vote. A financial revolution began. It's called PAPSS, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. It's not a speech, it's not a dream. It's software, it's live, and it's moving billions in local currencies without a single dollar in between. Now the unthinkable is unfolding. Africa is building a borderless economy, powered by a single financial infrastructure, and maybe, soon, a single African currency. So what just happened? And why is the West panicking now? In this video, let's find out. Africa's poverty has never been the result of a lack of natural wealth. From Nigeria's oil fields to Congo's cobalt reserves, the continent possesses extraordinary resources that the world depends on. And yet, Africa remains trapped, not by force, but by rules. Not the kind found in law books, but those baked into the global financial system: colonial currencies, exploitative trade mechanisms, and dependency on foreign financial architecture. These are the invisible shackles that have kept Africa economically subordinate long after political independence. One of the most obvious shackles is the CFA franc, a colonial-era currency still used by 14 African nations. Introduced by France in 1945, it functions under a system where these countries must keep half of their foreign exchange reserves in the French treasury. France claims this offers monetary stability. But in reality, it gives France control over African liquidity, interest rates, and currency values. It's a modern form of colonialism, where the colonizer no longer needs to occupy territory to dominate its economy. Then came the IMF and World Bank, offering loans to struggling African nations during economic downturns. But these loans were anything but free. Countries were forced to accept structural adjustment programs, policies that demanded they shrink public services, eliminate subsidies, privatize key industries, usually to foreign investors, and open their markets under the illusion of reform. These programs not only failed to generate growth, but often deepened inequality and eroded national sovereignty. And perhaps the most grotesque layer of financial dependency is dollar dominance. Africa's entire external trade system revolves around the US dollar. Whether Zambia trades with China or Kenya trades with Nigeria, the currency of exchange is rarely local. Instead, payments are routed through dollar-based accounts in New York, subject to US regulations, fees, and delays. This makes African economies not only expensive to operate, but also vulnerable to sanctions and external shocks. Incredibly, even intra-African trade, say, between Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, often requires conversion into dollars first, enriching foreign banks while taxing African cooperation. In short, Africa hasn't just been looted of minerals, it has been looted of monetary power. Trade between neighbors must pass through former colonial masters. Credit depends on institutions in Washington. And all of it is governed by systems built to benefit the West, not Africa. These are not partnerships. These are mechanisms of economic control disguised as stability. But all chains eventually rust. And this one snapped not with a protest, but with a platform, a digital one. In 2021, as the African Continental Free Trade Area was launched, leaders realized that free trade between 54 nations was impossible without financial independence. You can't have a borderless market if every transaction still pays tribute to Washington, Paris, or London. That's where the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPSS, comes in. Developed by African financial institutions and supported by the African Export-Import Bank, PAPSS is a homegrown solution to a centuries-old problem. It allows real-time, cross-border payments to be made in local African currencies, without converting into dollars or euros, and without passing through foreign banks. In essence, PAPSS removes the dollar as the gatekeeper of African trade, and the impact is revolutionary. For example, a business in Rwanda can now pay a supplier in South Africa using Rwandan francs, while the supplier receives South African rand. The system handles all currency conversion and settlement internally, securely, quickly, and at minimal cost. No international SWIFT transfers, no third-party correspondent banks, no middlemen. What once took days and cost a fortune now happens in seconds inside the continent. More importantly, this system delivers financial sovereignty. By eliminating dependency on the dollar, Africa blunts the West's most potent weapon, economic warfare. When the US wants to punish a country, it doesn't need tanks. It cuts access to dollars, freezes reserves, and cripples economies. PAPSS renders that tactic less effective. If the money never leaves Africa, it can't be frozen by foreign powers. And unlike many Pan-African initiatives that exist only on paper, PAPSS is already operational. As of 2025, more than 50 commercial banks and 14 central banks are live on the platform. Nigeria, Ghana, and Liberia are among the countries pushing this system forward. It's already saving time and money. But more than that, it's breaking psychological chains, proving that Africa doesn't need foreign permission to trade with itself. And this momentum generated by PAPS has reawakened a much older dream, one that goes back to the days of Nkrumah and Gaddafi, the vision of a single African currency. For years, the idea was dismissed as unrealistic, a utopian fantasy in a continent of diverse economies and fractured politics. But that was before the infrastructure started to materialize. That was before PAPS made the financial wiring of the continent technically possible. Now, the dream feels not only achievable, but inevitable. Regional currency frameworks are already underway. West Africa's eco-currency remains a top priority for ECOWAS. In the East and South, regional blocs are drafting plans for currency harmonization. And the reason is simple. Africa wastes over $5 billion every year on currency conversion costs alone, money that could fund schools, roads, electricity, or broadband. A single African currency would erase that waste, simplify trade, and remove the biggest barrier to economic integration: volatility and mistrust. It would allow African nations to price their exports in their own currency, from cocoa in Ghana to cobalt in Congo. It would create a common monetary identity, something the CFA franc never was, because it was built for the colonizer, not the continent. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. The benefits extend beyond economics. A unified currency would signal to the world that Africa is not a patchwork of weak states, but a coordinated, self-confident bloc. It would make investment easier, reduce transaction risk, and unlock continent-wide capital markets. For the first time in modern history, Africa could control the valuation of its resources, its labor, and its future. Therefore, the West took notice. Africa was no longer just talking about breaking free. It was building the systems to do it. And for the powers that have long benefited from Africa's monetary fragmentation and dollar dependency, that was unacceptable. In September 2024, a quiet but telling move was made. The African Union and ECOWAS announced a suspension of the single currency project, citing the need for macroeconomic convergence. The official explanation sounded technical, but the subtext was unmistakable: external pressure. Western institutions, ever fearful of losing control over a unified African economy, were exerting influence behind the scenes. The message to African leaders was clear: play by our rules or risk losing funding, credit ratings, and international support. These were not new tactics. This was the same strategy used during the era of structural adjustment, just dressed in 21st century diplomacy. The West wasn't challenging Africa with weapons, but with conditionalities and veiled threats. Yet something had changed. In previous decades, such pressure might have derailed the entire project. But in 2024, the movement didn't stop. PAPS continued to grow, quietly onboarding central banks and commercial institutions across the continent. The African Continental Free Trade Area kept opening new markets and harmonizing trade laws. And most critically, countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, which had already expelled French troops, began to explore full withdrawal from the CFA franc zone. These nations were no longer looking for reform within a colonial system. They were openly pursuing economic liberation. This momentum has also been echoed by bold political voices. Kenya's President William Ruto, for example, has spoken openly and repeatedly about the absurdity of African countries relying on the US dollar to trade with each other. His message resonates deeply with a generation tired of seeing Africa's wealth exported and its agency outsourced. Ruto's question is disarmingly simple. Why should a continent of 1.4 billion people and a $3 trillion economy need New York's permission to trade internally? The answer is even simpler. It doesn't. Not anymore. What is unfolding in Africa today is not a revolution with marching bands or fiery slogans. It is a quiet, technical rebellion, powered by financial infrastructure, digital networks, and back-end systems that most people never see, but that change everything. This is what makes it so dangerous to the status quo. There's no war to stop, no protest to crush. Just a slow, steady transfer of power from Paris and Washington to Accra, Nairobi, and Lagos. The West isn't panicking because of what's being said in speeches. It's panicking because what's being built is actually working. Each time a transaction on PAPSIS clears in local currencies without touching the dollar, the old global financial hierarchy weakens just a little more. Each time a new central bank joins the network, Africa adds another brick to the foundation of its own economic sovereignty. Each bilateral transaction that bypasses the SWIFT system is a silent rebellion against dependence. And the ultimate objective isn't just cost savings or faster payments. It's about building an entirely new financial identity. One where African countries can set prices for their exports, value their own currencies, and create continental liquidity without waiting for rating agencies, Western banks, or former colonial powers to give them approval. It is about rejecting a system in which value is dictated from outside and wealth flows only in one direction, out. This is how empires fall in the 21st century, not through invasions or violent overthrows, but through irrelevance. As Africa's internal trade grows more efficient and its financial systems begin to operate independently, the grip of the West is loosened, not by confrontation, but by obsolescence. What do you think? Why should African countries need the US dollar just to trade with each other? Isn't that a form of modern-day colonialism? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on whether Africa can really unite its currencies if some leaders are still loyal to Paris and Washington. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.